My name is Ari Lerner. I run a small company here in San Francisco called Fullstack, and today I'm going to be talking to you about AngularJS. Thank you. Awesome response. Wow, if I could get that response everywhere. There's Nate, right there. Hey. All right. This is an interactive workshop. Through the course of today, we will be building an application, a relatively complex application. If you have any questions, feel free to stop and say, "Hey, I have a question." We will be we'll be covering things, and then we'll be typing things, and then we'll be covering some more things, and we'll be typing some more things. My favorite kind of code is the kind that we delete, so we will also be deleting things. Awesome. But not anything that was previously on your computer. All right. As I said, also, if you do have a question, you can not only ask me and for the rest of the room, because somebody else may have the same question. You can also, if it's a more personal question, you can consult your therapist. Or if it's a more personal question regarding Angular, you can ask Nate. He's specifically here to help us out. And rockin'. Rock. Okay, cool. So today we're going to talk about AngularJS. Who here has used AngularJS before? Okay. This workshop is geared mostly towards beginners. However, we will be covering some more advanced things later. So, yeah, okay. I guess that's all I have to say to that. Right, so I kind of already mentioned a little bit of this when we first started. My name is Ari Lerner. I co-founded a company called Fullstack.io here in San Francisco. We've written a few books, including NG Book. There's some seats right here, or over there too. We also curate the Angular newsletter, NG newsletter. If you're on NG newsletter, then you got our newsletter from this morning. Here in San Francisco, I teach at a company called Hack Reactor. I teach at a couple other companies from time to time. And I have a background in systems and server and distributed computing. Systems.
Will we get a copy of the slides?
Sure. Just remind me at the end. Oh yeah, and there's the book. It's a pretty good book. I mean, I've read it a couple times. It's 630 pages. It covers anything and everything you want to do when you're using Angular in production. Okay, so for today, we're going to need some tools. We're going to need a text editor. If you don't have a text editor, now's a good time to go grab one. It needs to be a plain text editor, meaning it can't be something like text edit, because that adds markup in on the actual file. So if you don't have one, I suggest Sublime Text. That's what we're going to be using. What I'll be using today when we're typing. You can also use Vim, Emacs. There's another popular one. I don't remember the name of it. It's an IDE, but I honestly don't remember the name. Eclipse. WebStorm. You can use WebStorm. You can use Coda. I like Coda. We're also going to need a web browser. Likely you already have this on your computer. If you don't have Chrome on your computer, I suggest. Oh, thanks.
Congratulations.
Wow, sweet. Should I wear it?
Up to you.
All right.
No coffee for you, though. Without it.
Oh, okay. I'll put it on my arm. That doesn't work. All right. So you'll need a web browser. Likely your computer already has a web browser. If you don't have Chrome, I suggest you get Chrome, because we'll be using. I like Chrome. It's an advanced web browser, and everything that we're going to do works with it. We're also going to need a web server. If you have Python installed on your computer, you already have one. If you have Node.js installed, we're going to need Node anyway. So if you don't have Node installed, go grab it. Go to nodejs.org and click the big download button. I think it says getting started and then the download button. You can use that. We are going to use Node later in the class. We're going to use it to install some things and run some things. So make sure that you have Node and npm installed. You can also use Golang if you want to write a server real quick. Okay. Basically, what we have to do is we just have to serve a directory, so you'll see why. We'll talk about that. And then we have some files that we're going to use today. If you go grab these right now, this will bring you to a gist. This will bring you to a gist. And just click this big download button on that gist. Oh, good, you can see that. Sure. All right. Five, four, three, two, one. All right, and then we are also going to need to grab a Yelp API key because we are going to be talking to the Yelp API. So go to yelp.com/developers. And then click on that Getting Started button, and then you'll be going to this screen, and this screen has your API keys right there. Well, it will have them right here. I'm not affiliated at all with Yelp. I just like their API. Bless you.
Wi-Fi is pretty slow.
Is it?
I'm timing out.
Uh-oh. Are you guys all connected at least? You're just timing out on the request?
Yeah.
Anyone have a USB key? Can I borrow it? Thank you. That's pretty slick. No, that was the right one. You don't have anything secret on here, do you?
You might be able to airdrop too.
Oh, yeah. Do you guys have AirDrop on your computers? If you have a Mac, you do. If you don't have a Mac, grab this USB key and take everything off of it. If you're having, I'm just kidding. No, I'm just kidding.
Can I use it first?
Oh, yeah. No, you can't use it first, even though it's yours. Okay, so that will be going around. Cool. So today what we're going to do is we're going to be talking... Oh,
You want to airdrop it to me and I'll airdrop it to people that are...
sure. Oh, there you are. All right, it worked. And then whoever this other guy is totally getting it too. Whoa. They're multiplying. I can't keep up with you guys.
On which one?
All right, Nate, you take it from here. Mountain Frog, who's that? Rad, I like the name. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about, well, I guess I can just say, here's our agenda for the day. First, we're going to start out with how we deal with HTML today, and then we're going to talk about Angular, and then we're going to get started. And we're going to start writing our app right away. Then we're going to cover some basic topics in Angular, data binding, views, directives. If you've used Angular before, you know these terms. If you haven't used Angular before, don't fret. By the end of today, you will know all these terms and a lot more. And a lot more? Right. Okay. Then we're going to talk about XHR and get some data into our applications. Then we're going to move into some more advanced topics like testing and routing and all that fun stuff. Okay. I feel like I don't have your attention.
Does the website URL matter in the Yelp API key?
What do you mean?
What's asking me for like a...
Oh, no, it doesn't. You can just put in bogus information, but don't tell them I said that. Oh, shoot, this is being recorded. Put in real information. We are making a website today that will go to production and will make Yelp money. Just kidding. Or are we? I don't know. We'll see. Depends who can package it up and get it in the App Store first. Are you here for Angular?
Yes.
Come on in. There's a seat right there, too.
I'm fine. I just need power.
Okay.
I'm more comfortable.
How Japanese of you? Okay, if you don't have the files downloaded, raise your hand. Wait, it's not going to work if you keep your hands up while you're, because can you do it with one hand? Right. All right, we'll take another 5 minutes and I'll come around and use the USB key as well. Okay, so let's get started on HTML today and what we do with development and all that fun stuff. So HTML itself is really old. It's older than some of us. Some of us remember when it was a toy and it was really jokey and things. So, oh, that's unfortunate. Oh, it's back. Oh. All right, technical difficulties done. Okay, so HTML itself is old. Everyone in here raised your hand before when I said how many of you know HTML. So you guys already probably know what that looks like, and that's just a really basic HTML body. The thing is with HTML itself, it's just static markup. It's just static markup. So static markup itself, what I mean by that is like if you're reading a Word document, Word isn't going to jump out at you and do anything. Word, when you write Word documents or you print out a PDF, it's just static. HTML is just static as well. So how do we write web applications? How do we add interactivity to our applications? How does Facebook, when you click on the little chat button, how do you build stuff like that? Well, today we do things like adding JavaScript. Or rather, we do add JavaScript. Or if you like TypeScript, we use TypeScript. But that just compiles down to JavaScript anyway. Same with Dart and a couple other languages that compile. Everything compiles down to JavaScript because JavaScript itself is ubiquitous in the web browser. It wasn't the first, a little tidbit of history, it wasn't the first and it wasn't the only language that allowed us to add interactivity to web documents. It is the one that won out, of course. I think because it had the word Java in its name, but I could be wrong. Alternatively, that was just straight JavaScript. Alternatively, you can use a library like jQuery to add interactivity. For instance, hooray, I clicked on a button, and then all of a sudden the page changed. You can't do that with a Word document. Okay. The thing is with jQuery is it's just an imperative wrapper around DOM manipulation. So when you're using jQuery, what you're doing is you're adding a layer of abstraction, you're adding a layer of abstraction from the DOM, from the document object model. You're basically just writing straight JavaScript, but you're doing it in a more cross-browsery kind of way. I really like this quote. Okay. So what's wrong with this picture? No doubt anyone here who's worked on a team before, who's building a web application with other developers, you've run into the tight coupling problem. What I mean when I say tight coupling is when you're writing a web application, you write the skeleton, you write the structure, you write the HTML, and then you come back and in another file in a totally different language, you start typing out JavaScript. You write JavaScript that depends on the structure of that HTML being the same. So you're like, it's called targeting. You're targeting a DOM element inside of a web document that's again in a totally different spot than your HTML. What happens if you have a designer who's like, oh, I need another div around this box? Like, we're adding some rounded corners, and this one has a different type of corner, so I need to add another div, etc. Right? When you get into that, then all of a sudden your JavaScript doesn't work. You're like, well, what's going on? Like, why is my JavaScript broken, even though you haven't changed it, and even though it worked like 10 seconds ago, before you did a git pull and pulled all the new changes in? That's because there's this tight coupling that happens when you're writing JavaScript that depends on a structure in HTML. You also get this structureless code base, unless of course you enforce structure. There are suggested structures when you're building web applications, but you have to enforce that for yourself. You have to build that. And then additionally, you're also responsible for building the low-level interaction. Rather than thinking about your web application and building your web application, you're forced to say, well, how do I add interactivity to this button? How do I make this thing move over to here, and how do I hide this other guy? Basically, what you're doing is you're building like straight access to the DOM, and you're not focusing on your web application. Whereas, really, if you're building a web application that, unless of course you're really interested in manipulating the DOM specifically, you probably want to focus more on building your code rather than you do on how you get your code to talk to the browser. Okay, so I'm suggesting all these things that are wrong and bad today. Well, we'll go on the other side and say, well, what should we do? If we had our druthers, how would we write web applications? Okay, let's all take a quick break from our computers. I promise it'll be less than 10 seconds. Close your eyes and imagine it's 1991. Okay. HTML2 just came out and you're like, wait, we need to restart this. Or was that right before HTML2? I don't remember. I think it was right before or right after. Anyway, imagine that we're reinventing HTML. Okay, you can open your eyes and put your hands on the keyboard if it makes you feel more comfortable. HTML itself is declarative, right? You're like, I want an H1 tag. So you type out an H1 tag. You're declaring that you want an H1 tag. You want the browser to see that, and you want the browser to render that H1 tag for you. Shouldn't our interactivity, shouldn't the JavaScript that we write to our HTML be declarative as well? Oh, when I click on this button, I want this thing to happen. As opposed to, I'm going to write this button here, and then later I'm going to imperatively assume that button is on the page. I'm going to assume that button is on the page, and I'm going to imperatively add interaction to it. So this is where AngularJS comes in. AngularJS is an MVW framework. MVW stands for model view whatever. But it's really, it's kind of closely aligned with MVC, if you know MVC. If you've written anything in Rails, you know MVC from Rails or Django. It's like the posh framework. It's the posh development pattern today. So Angular itself is really super fast in both development when we're writing the code and also when we've deployed the code. It's really fast on an end user's browser, and we can make it a lot faster also, which we may or may not get in optimization today. But I know a book that gets really deep into optimization. It's also sponsored by Google. Google is a very large web company. You may have heard it, and they have hundreds of projects written in Angular, so they themselves are depending on Angular to be for their own web development. How do I know this? Because I work very closely with that team. It's also in production all over the internet, including some of our stuff, it's my company's stuff, as well as companies that we've worked with. It's Live Lovely if you've ever looked for an apartment. This is awesome. It's written in Angular. It's pretty awesome. I really like it. I'm looking for an apartment. If you know of an apartment here in the city, call me. Okay. It's used. There are a lot of web applications today that are built on Angular and in production on the web, and there's only an increasing growing amount, which is likely why you guys are here, because you've heard of it and it's pretty awesome. I could be wrong. It's also super cost efficient for very similar reasons as before. It's cost efficient in development because it makes it super fast. It's also cost efficient because you can host an Angular application on a static file server and not have it touch any of your running backends. That's how we do most of our deployment, by the way. We host everything on S3, and S3 is dirt cheap. And there's plenty of other options like S3, or you can host your own, but it's just a static file server. It's also cost efficient because there are many Angular developers coming onto the scene today, so it's really easy to find people who are writing Angular code, so you can hire more people if you're in the hiring department. Or if you want to get hired, there's a lot of people looking for Angular developers, so it's a good reason to learn it. It's also probably one of my favorite reasons. It's built with testing in mind. Everything that is shipped in Angular, the code base itself is tested. It's rigorously tested. You can see those tests are available online, of course. And also, because it itself is built with testing in mind, it has fantastic tools for us to write our own tests for our own production web applications. Both, this is something we'll get into later. Both unit testing, which is specifically designed for testing small bits of code, and also end-to-end testing, which is like pretending like you're your user clicking on buttons and things like that. So we'll get into that. That's why we need Node installed, by the way. It also has a really highly active community with many open source components. There's a lot of things. Likely, if something doesn't exist in the Angular code base by itself, you can likely find it online before you end up having to build it, because there are so many people working on Angular. There are so many open source plugins. It's been a long time since I've needed to write a plugin in for a production app because they're just available online. Hooray. Oh, and it's also completely free. Seriously, you don't have to pay for it. Okay. So now my Angular pitch has officially come to a close. Or just started, because we're doing an all-day workshop. Okay. So back to HTML. So this is the tidbit of HTML that we looked at before that has a headline, a span, and a button on the page. Excuse me. And also, one thing is if there's code on the screen, there's likely going to be a demo following it. In this case, they're collapsed in the same one, but well, I'll just reference that. And anyway, so this is the H1 tag from that has an ID of headline. There's a notice inside of here, and then there's obviously a button. That button doesn't do anything because we haven't added any interactivity to it. So before we dive into that, let's look at HTML itself. HTML has a bunch of elements. In the example that we just looked at, we have an H1 tag, we have a span, and we have a button. I like to think of, when I'm writing Angular code, I like to think of the H1 tag and the span and the button as a method call. So when the browser itself fetches your document, it's going to go through and compile and parse that document. I like to think of when it's parsing that document and sees that h1 tag, it's going to call the h1 method call. HTML itself also has these attributes in it. We had 3 attributes, or in our 3 elements, we had these 3 attributes. We had an ID that has an attribute of headline. We have a class that has an attribute of notice, or a value of notice, and we have an ID which has an attribute of buy button. I like to think of those as additional methods called on that previous method. So if you have that h1, there should be brackets around here. Sorry about that. So if you have this as an h1 call, it returns this, and then you say, okay, well, I'm going to call the ID method on that h1 call with a parameter of headline. On that span, we're going to call that span method that gets called, returns this. It's going to call class. It's going to call the class method, and that class method has a value of notice, etc. And these, I like to think of these as returning this itself, so you can chain methods together. Okay, so what about content? Well, we don't have to change anything if you think about it like that, because it's just going to call the content. Just going to call the content method inside of that element, which was previously called with an ID, which had the value of headline. Okay. Right. So if we want, if you think about it like this, then adding interactivity to something like this is really easy, right? Like, if you're like, okay, cool, I want to add a button that says when I click this, run this method, do this thing. When something changes in my backend, bind whatever changes to the content of this thing that I'm calling it on. So really, what we want at the end is something like we have the span button, we have the span, and we have we're calling the class method on it with a value of notice. Oh, and we also want to bind it to the message, notice message. We have this button. We want, when this button is clicked, we want to execute the purchase because we want to fulfill that user's desire to buy something. Buy now, hooray. The advantages that we get from doing something like this is we lose that tight coupling. You're no longer depending on a structure of an HTML document existing. You're on a page in a completely different file. You are declaratively calling the interactivity that you want inside of your page. It also gives a structure to our code base, and we're no longer thinking, when we have something like this, we're no longer thinking about, well, how does the DOM update? We're saying, well, what message do I want to show to my user? How do I want my user to be able to buy this book that I'm selling? Because, okay. Insert books pitch here. Okay. Right, so you get this high-level interaction. Okay, cool. So let's look at building our first Angular app, and then we're actually going to jump into our code base and do it. If you've been to the AngularJS.org homepage, you've likely seen a demo like this. This demo, this Angular app right here allows us to allow the user to type in their name, and then as they're typing in their name, the page itself is updating at the same time. Hooray! Ooh, ah.
Hooray.
Hooray, okay. Interactivity, you see? I'm building it in. When I say ooh, you say a. Ooh. You know, I always want that to work the first time, and it never does. Okay. So this Angular application looks like this. Oh, wow, that's not very long, is it? Okay. Inside of this Angular application, we've done 4 things. So the first thing that we've done is we've included Angular, because you can't write an Angular application if you don't have Angular. Oh, I'm sorry. For anyone who didn't see it. I'm trying to go the other way. Okay, for anyone who didn't see it, that's the demo, right? So inside this demo, we've done 4 things. We've included Angular itself. In this case, you probably want to download Angular, because in our gist, I believe we're grabbing it from a CDN. Yes, we are. We'll do that in a minute. Hold on, don't go anywhere. Not yet. So we've included Angular. Second thing that we've done is, we've bootstrapped our app. We've done this with an attribute on the HTML document model. We've added this thing called ng-app like that. And then we've set up the bidirectional binding. That bidirectional binding is set up with two new things that we haven't seen yet. This other attribute called ng-model, like that. And then we've also used a template tag. And we've included the thing that we've set to that ng-model. So you can see here we have ng-model equals your name, and then we also have your name inside this thing. Okay. Almost to our keyboards. So the first thing that we have to do when we're building an Angular application is define our application. Angular itself was written to be very modular. So when we're writing applications, we're not actually writing an Angular app. We're writing an Angular module. So the way that we write an Angular module is we use the module function on our Angular global object. The module function looks like this. We have a setter and a getter version of this. When you want to create an application, you'll use the setter version. The setter version is very similar to the getter version, but it has a second parameter. Just like that. Okay. For the time being, when we write our applications, just deal with this thing in here. We'll talk about what that is in a minute. Okay, cool. So now let's jump to our keyboards.
Hey, Ari,
Yeah.
is there a reason there was no semicolon on the second one? Or is that just...
No, just a mistype.
Okay.
Thanks for asking, though. There we go.
Did everybody get Node and the gist? You've got here on the USB key. Did everybody do that?
Let's change this to a white. What's a good white?
Who wants Node?
Who wants Node?
Nobody. Do you?
I have.
Great.
All right, cool. Okay, so this should look really familiar to you because this is the same structure. You can't really see that sidebar. I'm sorry about that. But there, I promise this is just the gist downloaded. It's huge. Okay. First thing I'm going to say is let's actually go grab Angular. You can grab Angular if you go to the angularjs.org page. Hopefully you can download it. Maybe not. I would expect the internet to be a little better. Oh, totally gonna turn this guy off. Okay, if you make it this far, click on that download button. All right, open up AirDrop, guys. Aren't we at HTML5 web, like DevConf? Shouldn't we like get access to the web? Is no one outraged? I'm outraged.
Just wait till Thursday.
What?
Just wait till Thursday.
Oh yeah, it's gonna be worse.
We're not in the fast lane here.
Oh, are you making an internet tube joke? Okay. The internet super highway. It's like the internet super right lane way. Oh, awesome! It loaded. No. Okay. All right. Well, we can try. Let's see if the CDN is doing us any better. Okay. Right. So you may be able to just try the CDN for the time being. Right. So if you so everyone here has the gist, right? Cool. Double click on that index.html file and load it in your browser. You shouldn't see anything because we don't have anything on the page yet. But just make sure that you can that there's no errors in your error console.
All right, I think we're going to have to download Angular and Bootstrap.
Yeah. So when we take our break, I'll make sure we do that ourselves. So you may not have Bootstrap immediately. Hooray. Oh, I have them. I can grab it we'll do it at our break. Right. So let's build our Angular module. We don't need internet access to build our Angular module. So how do I write an Angular module again? Somebody? Yeah, who was? Oh yeah, what's your name?
Paul.
Paul. Cool. Thanks, Paul. Yeah, so we type, you gotta type it right. Angular.module, and then we're making the getter or the setter version of it because we're creating an application. Today we're gonna create an application, we'll call it something like my app. And it's a setter version, so we'll set a second parameter in there. And for the time being, it's just an empty array. Does everyone have an Angular module typed out? Does everyone have their computers open?
I think we're all still just trying to like get AngularJS downloaded.
Okay, well, I promise for the time being you don't need Angular. Like, we can do a lot of work without actually loading it on the page. Okay. Right, that's really unfortunate. Maybe we should take our break now so we can pass dependencies around when we come back. Yes, let's do that.